She was married, and I was her best friend. It was never supposed to turn into more, but somewhere between her tears and my silence, we crossed a line we could never uncross. People say love is simple, but ours? It was everything love isn't supposed to be, yet somehow, it felt real. I'm Maya. I met Amber 3 years ago, at a marketing conference in Seattle. At first, she was just another face in a crowded room, sharp suit, calm smile, that kind of quiet confidence that makes people stop and listen when she speaks. I remember thinking, she seems like someone who has her life perfectly together. She didn't. We sat next to each other during a workshop about brand storytelling. She cracked a joke about how every company pretends to have a personality, and I laughed a little too loudly. After that, we just clicked. By the end of the conference, we were talking like old friends. She told me about her husband, Derek, a software engineer, and how marriage was comfortable but not exciting. I told her about my messy breakup a few months earlier. We traded numbers, promised to stay in touch, and actually did, which is rare, right? Most conference friendships die after 2 polite emails, but ours didn't. Ours grew. At first, it was just occasional texts, then long calls, then video chats that lasted until midnight, where we'd talk about everything from career goals to favorite songs, to why life sometimes feels like a race no one remembers signing up for. She made me laugh like no one else, and she listened, really listened, like my words actually mattered. When I got promoted and moved from San Francisco to Chicago, she was the first person to call and say, "You're going to do amazing. I just know it." Her confidence in me felt like sunlight, and I didn't realize then how much I started to crave it. A few months later, she visited Chicago for work. We met for dinner, just 2 friends catching up. She hugged me tightly when she saw me, and I noticed she smelled like lavender and something faintly citrus. Her hair brushed my cheek, and for a second, it felt different. I brushed it off. Dinner was perfect. We laughed. We teased each other. We drank a little too much wine. When it was time to say goodbye, she hesitated at the hotel lobby door. "I really needed this," she said quietly. "You make things feel simple again." Her voice cracked on that last word. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but she smiled that same calm, collected smile and said, "Text me when you get home, okay?" And that was the first night I realized that maybe, just maybe, we weren't just friends anymore. After that, everything felt slightly different, not wrong, just charged. We'd still talk about work and life, but in between, there were tiny pauses, small silences that carried too much meaning. She'd say things like, "You're the only person I can be myself around," or, "Sometimes I wish I could just escape everything and start over with someone who understands." And even though she never said it directly, I could feel what she meant. Then came the night everything shifted. It was late past midnight, and I was half asleep when my phone rang. Amber. Her voice was shaky. "I'm sorry to call this late. Derek and I had a fight. I didn't know who else to call." Without thinking, I said, "Come over, please." 20 minutes later, she was at my door, eyes red, mascara smudged, clutching her phone like it was keeping her alive. I wrapped her in a hug, and she just broke sobbing into my shoulder. "He doesn't listen, Maya. I keep telling him what I need, and he just stares at me like I'm speaking another language." I held her tighter. "You don't deserve to feel invisible." She looked up, her face inches from mine. For a second, we just stared at each other like the air had thickened between us. Then she blinked, pulled away, and whispered, "Thank you for being here." We sat on the couch till dawn, sipping tea, watching the sky turn pink. She fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and even though I told myself it meant nothing, somewhere deep down, I knew it did. That night changed everything. Not in an obvious way, no confession, no kiss, just a shift. A quiet, invisible shift that made friendship suddenly feel fragile. Because after that, every touch, every word, every moment between us carried something unspoken, something neither of us dared to name. After that night, nothing between us went back to how it was. We still talked every day, still sent each other memes, still joked about stupid things, but underneath, something shifted. It was subtle at first, longer pauses during calls, her voice softening when she said my name, the way she'd sometimes stare at me on video chat like she was memorizing my face. And I noticed it. God, I noticed everything. The late night messages, the "I miss you" texts that felt too personal, the random "Are you awake?" calls that came more and more often. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but I wasn't. One Saturday, she came to Chicago again for a client meeting. We planned to grab coffee after, like always. When she walked in, she looked different. Hair loose, no wedding ring, a nervous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look tired," I said softly. "Rough week?" She shrugged. "Rough marriage." We sat at a corner table, quiet for a while, just stirring our drinks. Then she said, almost whispering, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Like, you've built everything right, the house, the job, the relationship, but when you're alone, it all feels wrong, like you're playing a part." I didn't know what to say, because I could hear what she wasn't saying. That day, we walked along the river after coffee. The city was glowing golden light, boats drifting by, people laughing in the distance. It should have felt normal, but every step between us carried a kind of tension neither of us wanted to name. She slipped her arm through mine, casual, friendly, almost automatic, and I froze. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt too right. She noticed, smiled a little. "You're so stiff," she teased, Relax. I'm not going to bite. I laughed, trying to sound normal, but my heart was pounding in my chest like I'd just run a marathon. We stopped at a bridge and leaned against the railing, watching the water move. The silence between us was soft and terrifying. Sometimes, she said quietly, I think you understand me better than anyone ever has. I turned to face her. Maybe because I actually listen. She smiled that tired, beautiful smile, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might cry. You have no idea how much that means to me. From that day on, she started finding reasons to call me every night. At first, it was small things, asking for advice, sharing work stress, complaining about traffic. But slowly, the calls turned more personal. She'd tell me about her fears, her regrets, the loneliness she couldn't explain to Derek. And every time, I'd tell myself I was just being a good friend, that I wasn't crossing any line. But the truth, we both already had. One night, she called me after a dinner party. I could tell she'd been drinking. Her voice was soft, emotional. I wish you were here, she said. Everyone was laughing, talking, but I felt completely alone. And I kept thinking, if you were there, it would have felt different. My stomach twisted. Amber, I know, she interrupted quickly. You're probably thinking I'm being ridiculous. I don't know how to explain it. You don't have to, I said quietly. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing slow, uncertain. Then she whispered, you mean more to me than you probably should. And that was the first time she said it out loud. I didn't sleep that night. Every word replayed in my head, over and over. She was married. I was her friend. And yet, nothing about us felt like just friends anymore. The next morning, she sent a text. Sorry for last night. I crossed a line. I stared at it for a long time before replying. It's okay. We're both human. But deep down, I knew okay wasn't the truth. We'd opened a door neither of us could close again. Over the next few weeks, things only got harder to ignore. Her messages got more affectionate. She started calling me her safe place. And sometimes, she'd send voice notes, her voice trembling slightly. Like every word carried something unsaid. I started feeling guilty. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I wanted to. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to see her name light up my phone. I wanted to be the person she turned to, even though I knew I shouldn't be. Then one evening, she texted, can I see you? Just 3 words. No reason, no context. And without thinking twice, I said yes. That night, when she arrived, I could tell something in her had changed. She wasn't nervous anymore. She looked sure, like someone who'd finally stopped fighting herself. And in that moment, standing at my doorstep, she said something that made my heart stop. Maya, I don't think I can keep pretending anymore. I remember every second of that moment, the sound of rain outside, the faint hum of the city through the window, and Amber standing there, soaked, shaking, her mascara smudged, her eyes glassy and tired. For a second, I couldn't move. Neither of us could. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, waiting for one of us to say something that would change everything. Amber, what are you doing here? My voice came out softer than I meant. She looked at me, really looked, and then whispered, I don't know. I just couldn't be there anymore. At home? She nodded. At home, with him, with everything. I just needed to breathe. Her voice cracked on that last word, and something inside me did too. I stepped aside. Come in. She hesitated, just for a moment, and then walked in. Her perfume, her presence, it filled the room instantly, warm and painfully familiar. I handed her a towel, and she laughed quietly. That small, broken laugh that said I shouldn't be here, but I am. She sat on the edge of the couch, towel wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the floor. He doesn't even look at me anymore, she said finally. We sit across the table, and it's like talking to a stranger. Sometimes I think he hates me, sometimes I think I hate myself. I sat beside her, not sure what to say. Amber, don't, she interrupted softly. Don't say I should fix it. There was a long silence. Then she turned to me, eyes wet. You ever meet someone who just sees you? Not the version you show the world, but you? The messy, scared, complicated you? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I think I have. Her gaze didn't waver. That's what you are to me. Something inside me broke open, because I had been trying so hard to stay on the right side of the line. But hearing her say that, it was like every wall I'd built started to crumble. Amber, I whispered. You can't. I know, she said quickly. I know what I'm saying isn't fair, but I can't pretend anymore. Not with you. Her voice cracked again, and before I could stop myself, I reached out and held her hand. She didn't pull away. We sat there, fingers intertwined, while the rain tapped against the windows like it was keeping our secret. Do you remember that day at the bridge? She asked suddenly. Of course I do. I wanted to kiss you, she said. I almost did. The air left my lungs. She kept looking at me, like she was waiting for permission to breathe. And what stopped you? I asked quietly. Fear, she said. Fear of ruining everything. Fear of what it meant. And now, she smiled sadly, now I'm more afraid of never telling you. She moved closer, her hand brushing mine again this time, deliberate. And even though I knew how wrong it was, I didn't stop her. Because, for months, I'd been pretending too. Pretending I didn't wait for her calls. Pretending I didn't care when she said she missed me. Pretending I wasn't falling for someone I could never have. Amber, I whispered, her name trembling in my throat. Tell me you don't feel it too, she said. I wanted to. God, I wanted to say it. I don't. But every lie got stuck somewhere between my heart and my mouth. So instead, I just looked at her, and that silence, that heavy heavy, fragile silence said everything. She leaned in, so close I could feel her breath on my skin, and then she stopped. "If I cross this line," she whispered, "there's no going back." My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. "Then don't cross it," I said, though I didn't move either. For a moment, we just stared at each other, suspended in that space between wanting and shouldn't. Then she pulled back, wiped her eyes, and whispered, "I should go." I nodded. Yeah, but neither of us stood up. She finally left a few minutes later. No kiss, no goodbye, just one last look before the door closed behind her. And in that silence that followed, I realized the hardest part wasn't that she left. It was knowing she'd be back. Because some connections don't end when you walk away. They linger quiet, aching, waiting for the next mistake. The next morning, the city felt quieter than usual. Or maybe it was just me. My apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, soft jasmine and rain. It lingered in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. I stood in the kitchen with a cup of coffee I didn't even want, staring at the spot on the couch where she'd sat the night before. The towel was still there, folded neatly. She'd always been like that, tidy, thoughtful, even in chaos. And now she was gone. I told myself not to text her, not to call, not to check her Instagram like some lovesick teenager. But my fingers hovered over my phone anyway. Every hour, every minute. I drafted a dozen messages and deleted every single one. "Are you okay? Did you make it home safe? I'm sorry." None of them felt right, because nothing was right anymore. 3 days passed. No call, no text. Just silence, the kind that gets heavier the longer it stretches. By the 5th day, I convinced myself she'd changed her mind, that she'd realized how irrational the whole thing had been, that she'd gone back to Derek and maybe, somehow, patched things up. I almost believed that lie, until I got a text from Derek. Derek: "Hey Maya, do you have a minute to talk?" Me: "Hey, yeah, of course. Everything okay?" Derek: "Not really. It's about Amber." My stomach dropped. We hadn't spoken directly in months, not since the last time they'd invited me to dinner, that awkward night filled with tension and forced smiles. I typed back, "Me, what happened?" He replied almost instantly, "Derek, I think she left me." I froze. Me: "What do you mean?" Derek: "She packed a bag, said she needed space, said she didn't know who she was anymore." I read that line over and over again until my eyes blurred. Derek: "Did she say anything to you? Anything about what's going on?" I didn't know what to say. There were 100 truths I could have told him, and not one of them would have made sense. So I lied. Me: "No, I haven't heard from her." "I'm sorry, Derek." He didn't reply after that. That night, I went for a walk. The city was alive, cars honking, laughter spilling out of bars, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement, but I felt disconnected from all of it. Every corner, every sound reminded me of her. The little cafe where she'd laugh too loud. The bookstore where she'd make me promise not to buy her another novel, and then beg to borrow it the next week. Everything was hers, and suddenly, none of it felt like mine anymore. A week later, she called. Her name flashed on my screen, and my heart dropped straight into my stomach. I didn't answer at first. I just stared at her name. Then, on the 3rd ring, I picked up. "Amber?" "Hey." Her voice was quiet, strained. "I didn't know if you'd pick up. I wasn't sure if I should." "Yeah, I get that." There was a pause, the kind that feels like 100 unspoken things balancing on a wire. "I didn't go back," she said finally. "I left him." My chest tightened. "Where are you?" "Staying with my cousin. Out of town for a bit." "Amber, this isn't because of you?" she finished. "No, not entirely, but maybe partly. You made me see what I was pretending not to. That doesn't make me feel better. It's not supposed to." There was another silence. Only this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt inevitable. "I miss you," she whispered. I closed my eyes. "Don't. I know. I'm sorry. I can't talk to anyone else right now." "You shouldn't talk to me either." "Then why did you answer?" That question hit harder than I expected, because I wanted to make sure you were okay. "I'm not," she said softly, "but hearing your voice helps." And before I could say anything else, the line went quiet. She didn't hang up, just stayed there, breathing softly on the other end. And I didn't hang up either, because even though I knew we were both breaking, that silence between us still felt safer than the world outside it. Days turned into weeks. She texted occasionally, little things. "Saw your favorite coffee place today. You'd laugh at this book I found. Miss your stupid playlists." I tried to keep my replies short. "Hope you're okay. Take care. Good night." But the truth was, every message she sent lit something inside me I couldn't put out, and every time I hit send, I hated myself a little more for not letting her go. One night, around 2 a.m., she texted again. "I can't sleep. Everything feels wrong." I stared at that message for a long time, and for the first time since all of it began, I didn't reply. Because sometimes love isn't the hardest part. It's the distance that follows it, the kind that's measured not in miles, but in silence. I didn't hear from Amber for almost a month after that night. At first, I thought it was a good thing that maybe she was finally doing what we both needed her to do. Move on, rebuild, heal. But silence has a way of changing shape the longer it lasts. At first it feels like peace, then it becomes absence. And eventually, it turns into worry. By the 3rd week, I couldn't pretend anymore. Every time my phone phone buzzed, I hoped it was her. Every time it wasn't, I told myself I was fine. But I wasn't. It was Derek who called first. Again, his voice sounded different this time, sharper, tired. The way people sound when they've been living inside an argument that never ends. Maya, I know you said you haven't talked to her much, he said. But if you hear from her, please tell her to call me. Is everything okay? He sighed. She sent me divorce papers. I froze. What? Yeah, no warning. Just a lawyer's email. Said she's done pretending, that she needs to find herself. Whatever that means. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to sound sympathetic, neutral, but guilt has a way of poisoning even silence. I'm sorry, Derek. I managed. I don't know what happened to her, he said bitterly. It's like she became someone else overnight. He paused. Did you know she quit her job? No. Yeah, she just walked out. No notice, no explanation. I could hear him pacing, the sound of frustration in every step. If she reaches out to you, just tell her I want to talk. Please. I will, I said quietly even though I didn't mean it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the bridge, the rain, her confession, the silence that followed, and now this. I wanted to tell myself I wasn't the reason her life was collapsing, that she'd been unhappy long before me, but deep down, I knew I'd lit a fuse I never should have touched. And when you start a fire in someone already burning, you don't get to act surprised when everything goes up in flames. 2 days later, she finally texted. Amber, can we talk? I didn't respond right away. My hands were shaking. Then another message came. Amber, please, I need to see you. Against every logical part of me, I said yes. We met at a small diner just outside the city, the kind of place where no one asks questions and the coffee tastes like old secrets. She looked different, lighter somehow, but also hollow. Her hair was shorter, her clothes looser, her smile forced. You look tired, I said. I am, she replied, but free. Derek told me about the divorce. She nodded. I couldn't stay. I tried, Maya. I really did. But every time I looked at him, it felt like lying. I stared at my coffee. And what about me? She was quiet for a long time. Then, you were the only thing that felt real. My heart ached, because a part of me wanted to believe that what we had, whatever it was, meant something more than confusion and guilt. But the truth? It was built on broken pieces. Amber, we can't just pick up from where we left off. I'm not asking for that. Then what are you asking for? She looked at me, eyes red, voice trembling. For you not to hate me. I could never hate you. Even after everything. We talked for hours. About her new apartment, the job she hadn't figured out yet, the therapy she'd just started. She told me she cried for days after leaving. That she felt both relief and guilt in equal measure. And then she said something I'll never forget. Do you think I ruined your life? I blinked. What? Because sometimes, I think I did. I look at you and I see what I broke. You were my safe place, Maya, and I turned you into a secret. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We both broke something. That's the truth. She nodded, tears spilling now. I'm trying to forgive myself, but I don't know how. You start by forgiving the version of yourself who didn't know better. She smiled weakly. You sound like my therapist. Maybe she's right. Before she left, she reached across the table and took my hand. I don't know what comes next, she said, but I needed you to know that leaving him wasn't about chasing you. It was about finding me. That's good, I said. That's how it should be. Still, she whispered, squeezing my hand. You'll always be my favorite what if. And just like that, she was gone again. That night, I cried for the first time in months, not because I'd lost her, but because, for the first time, I knew I had to. Some loves don't end with goodbye. They end with understanding and the quiet acceptance that not everything beautiful is meant to stay. 6 months passed before I saw her again. Half a year long enough for the seasons to change, for wounds to scab, but not long enough for them to disappear. By then, I had started putting my life back together. Therapy twice a week, morning jogs, dinner with friends who didn't ask too many questions. I even started smiling again, the kind of smile that didn't feel rehearsed. I told myself I was healing, and for the most part, I was, until her name appeared on my phone again. Amber, I'm in the city. Could we meet? Just once. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Me. Why? Amber, because I need to say goodbye properly this time. We met at a small park near the river, the same place we'd once walked together laughing about nothing, sharing fries from a paper bag. Now it felt different. Quieter, heavier. She was sitting on a bench when I arrived, bundled in a beige coat, hair a little longer now. She looked calmer, more grounded. But her eyes, those soft, uncertain eyes, were the same. Hey, I said. She smiled faintly. Hey. For a second, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere nearby. You look good, she said finally. So do you. I've been working on myself, she said, smiling awkwardly. Therapy, journaling, you know, all the things people say you should do after burning your life down. Does it help? Some days, yeah. Other days, I still wake up missing things that were never mine to begin with. She looked at me, then really looked. You were right to walk away. I swallowed hard. I didn't feel right. I just felt lost. You did what I couldn't, she said softly. You stopped the story before it turned into a disaster. Amber, no, let me say this. She took a deep breath. I blamed you for a long time, for the guilt, the loneliness, the choices I made, but it wasn't your fault. I was trying to fill an emptiness that had nothing to do with you." Her voice broke slightly, and for the first time, I realized how heavy that confession must have been. "You don't owe me that," I said. "I do," she insisted, "because I loved you, in the most confusing, selfish, broken way possible, but it was love, and I needed to tell you that, without expecting anything back." For a long time, we just sat there in silence, and for the first time in a long time, that silence didn't feel painful. It felt complete. "So," I asked, "what now?" She smiled, a little sadly. "Now, I start over. I've got a new job offer in Seattle. It's scary, but it feels right. A clean slate." "That's good," I said. "You deserve that." "And you?" I thought for a second. "I'm still figuring it out, but I think I'm learning to be okay with that." She nodded. "I'm glad." There was one last pause, the kind you both know is final but can't quite say out loud. Then she reached out, gently took my hand, and said, "Thank you for loving me, even when it wasn't easy." "Thank you for teaching me what boundaries mean," I whispered. She laughed quietly through her tears. "Guess we were each other's lessons." "Maybe that's what we were meant to be," I said. "Not forever, just a chapter that changes everything." She smiled, stood up, and squeezed my hand one last time. "Goodbye, Maya." "Goodbye, Amber." I watched her walk away until she disappeared around the corner, and when she was gone, I didn't cry. I just sat there breathing, existing, free. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an honest one, and sometimes, that's all you need. It's strange how easily life moves on even when your heart swears it never will. One morning, I woke up and realized it had been almost a year since I'd last seen Amber. No texts, no calls, no "I miss you" at midnight. Just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't ache. It just was. I'd changed a lot in that year. Got a promotion at work, moved into a new apartment, started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. There were still days when I caught myself looking at old photos, or driving past the cafe where we used to sit for hours. But instead of pain, I felt gratitude. She had been a part of my life, messy, complicated, unforgettable, and that counted for something. It didn't have to be forever to matter. One Friday night, my coworker Emma dragged me to a dinner party. I didn't want to go. I never did, but she insisted, promising good food and better wine. That's where I met Connor. He was nothing like Amber. Steady, patient, a little awkward at first, but with a quiet confidence that made me feel safe. He didn't chase conversations, he listened. He didn't fill silences, he made them comfortable. For months, I'd convinced myself I'd never feel that pull again, that spark that makes the world soften at the edges. But with Connor, it wasn't a spark. It was a slow, steady warmth, like standing in sunlight after a long winter. Our relationship grew naturally, no drama, no late-night breakdowns, just two people choosing each other, quietly, every day. He never asked too much about my past, and I never volunteered too much either. Some stories, I'd learned, don't need to be retold to be remembered. One night, we were lying on the couch watching some old black and white film. He fell asleep halfway through, his head resting on my shoulder, and out of nowhere, I thought of Amber, not with sadness, just wonder, because without her, without all of it, I might never have learned what it really means to be seen, to want something, and still walk away from it because love without peace isn't love at all. Weeks later, I got an email from an old coworker. Subject line, "Guess who just got engaged?" I didn't have to guess. Amber. There was a photo attached, her standing in a field, sunlight behind her, holding someone's hand. Her smile looked real this time, unburdened. I stared at it for a while, waiting for the familiar sting of jealousy or regret, but it never came. Just a quiet kind of closure. That night, I told Connor about her. Not the whole story, just enough. "There was someone once," I said. "It was complicated. We cared about each other, but it wasn't meant to be." He nodded, his thumb tracing circles on my hand. "Sometimes the hardest loves are the ones that teach us the most," he said. I smiled. Yeah, she did. And for the first time, I realized I could talk about her without flinching, without guilt, without that ache in my chest that used to feel like loss. It wasn't loss anymore. It was memory softened, distant, and strangely beautiful. A few months later, I started journaling again. The first page simply said, "Maybe moving on isn't about forgetting who you were with them. Maybe it's about remembering who you were before them and learning to love that person again." And that's exactly what I did. 3 years had passed since the last time I'd thought of Amber in more than passing moments. Life had settled into something steady, calm, almost serene. Connor and I had moved into a small house just outside the city. The mornings were quieter here, the kind of quiet where you can actually hear your own thoughts and not be scared of them anymore. I'd started teaching weekend art classes at a local community center. There were kids with bright eyes and messy hands, and every Saturday, I watched them create without fear of imperfection. It reminded me of something I'd lost a long time ago, the courage to be unfiltered. One evening, as I was locking up after class, I noticed a message on my phone. It was from an unknown number. "Hi, I'm sorry if this is unexpected. This is Derek." For a second, my heart stopped. Derek, Amber's ex-husband. I hesitated before opening the rest of the message. "I know we never really spoke, but I thought you should know. Amber passed away last month. She'd been sick for a while. She mentioned your name a few times before things got bad. Said you were someone who really saw her." The world tilted a little. I sat on the steps outside the center, phone trembling in my hand. Amber, gone. Even after all these years, after all the healing, the news hit like a wave. For a long while, I just sat there, watching the sunset smear gold across the horizon. Memories began to unravel, one after another, her laugh, her scent, that night in the rain, when we almost kissed but didn't, and the last words she'd ever said to me, "Maybe in another life we'd get it right." right. I thought I'd prepared myself for this day, the day the past would finally stop existing in the world. But nothing really prepares you for knowing someone you once loved is now just a memory. Derek sent another message later that night. She wrote letters before she passed. I found one with your name on it. If you'd like, I can mail it to you. It took me 3 days to reply. When the letter arrived, I stared at it for hours before opening it. Her handwriting was still the same, messy, a little rushed, like her words were always trying to outrun her thoughts. Maya, it began. If you're reading this, I guess I'm gone. I've tried to write this letter a dozen times, but nothing ever sounds right. So I'll just say, thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. You once told me that love doesn't always need a happy ending, just honesty. You were right. What we had was messy, but it was real, and I carried it with me, even when I couldn't admit it. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. And if you ever think of me, I hope it's with a smile, not sadness. Amber. By the time I finished reading, tears had blurred the ink into tiny constellations across the paper. That night, I walked outside. The air was cool, the sky wide and quiet. I looked up and whispered, "You were loved, Amber. You really were." And for the first time since I'd met her, I felt like those words finally reached her wherever she was. A week later, I framed the letter, not as a reminder of pain, but of truth. Of how love can exist even when it doesn't last. Of how people come into your life not to stay, but to teach you something only they could. Connor noticed it hanging by my art table one morning. He read it silently, then looked at me. "She meant a lot to you," he said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, she did. And you to her." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one evening, while cleaning my studio, I found an old painting I'd done years ago. A faceless woman standing at the edge of a lake, her reflection clearer than her form. Back then, I didn't understand what it meant. Now, I did. Sometimes, people mirror back the parts of ourselves we've forgotten. Amber had been that mirror, and losing her taught me how to see myself again. I placed the painting on the wall beside the letter. Two pieces of the same story, both reminders that love, in its truest form, doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. And as I turned off the lights that night, I smiled not out of sorrow, but gratitude, because some stories don't end. They just find their way home.